Hello, good morning, and welcome to everyone to this webinar on data governance in the BRICS. My name is Luca Belli. I'm professor here at FGV Law School, where I had the Center for Technology and Society at FGV, and I also direct the Cyber BRICS project. Today, this webinar is part of a series of webinars dedicated to digital policies in the BRICS that we have organized together with our friends and partners from the Brazilian Foreign Affairs Ministry, Itamaraty. And this is the last one after having organized other two on digital transformation and one on AI sovereignty over the past months. These webinars have been organized ahead of the BRICS summit that will take place here in Rio de Janeiro in July. And the goal of the webinars is precisely to positively contribute to the debate about digital policies in the BRICS and try to inform the choices that our policymaker will have to take in the next weeks to shape the BRICS summit outcomes. Now, today with me, I have the great pleasure of having a very large set of speakers, distinguished speakers. Unfortunately, the representative of Itamaraty, Carolina von der Weid, was not able to join us because of a last-minute impediments, but she has recorded a video that we will share. Then we will have our opening by Dr. Jerzy Miola, who has been recently appointed as a new director of ANPD, the Brazilian National Data Protection Regulator. And then we will enter into the panel with first our friend Ahmad Binder, who is Director of Digital Intelligence of the Digital Cooperation Organization. Then Dr. Ekaterina Martinova, who is lecturer at the Higher School of Economics, Moscow. Then Sweta Mohandas, who is research lead and researcher indeed at CIS India. Then Wei Wang, who is researcher at Hong Kong University, and then last but not least, our good friend Sizwe Snide, that I see has just joined us. He's professor at Nelson Mandela University and also former board member of the InfoReg South Africa, the information regulator and indeed also data protection regulator of South Africa. Now, before we start, let me just ask our distinguished speaker to express their consent by doing this or by nodding to the recording of this video, of course, expressing their consent to the fact that they are willingly participating to this webinar and also agreeing that all the opinions that will be shared are their own opinion. And of course, they are not an official policy of FGV. So that is the moment where we can all do this, and then after this, we can start with our issue of the day. So let me start with a little bit of a presentation of some key ideas that we are going to debate today, and especially how we reached this idea through our research over the past 5 or 6 years. So I have prepared this very brief presentation on some key issues that I want to share with you to understand why we have dedicated this final webinar of the series to data governance in the BRICS. So the issue of data sovereignty and digital cooperation from the BRICS. It's very important for us to try to shed a little bit of light on this issue to understand how this issue became so prominent in the BRICS grouping that was not born as a grouping dedicated to digital issue, but to some extent was forced to become such a priority, the discussion of digital issues in the BRICS. And over the past decade has indeed become one of the main issues discussed by the group. Now, this is the main reason, this gentleman is the main reason why BRICS have started to prioritize data governance issues. So after the Snowden revelation 11 years ago, for the first time, the BRICS grouping, including in the eThekwini Declaration adopted in South Africa, this fragment and the emphasis of the adoption of norms, standards, and practices for the security of ICT. This was the first mention 11 years ago, just a few weeks after the Snowden revelation. That included also targeting, at the time, former President Dilma Rousseff with illegal wiretapping. President Dilma Rousseff, that today is the president of the BRICS-led New Development Bank. And since 2013, there has been an increase in relevance. So you see that then a couple of years after, in the Xiamen Declaration, the BRICS leader reiterated their not only commitment to shared norms or regarding cybersecurity, but also included data protection for the first time. And so it is interesting here to see that over the past decade, cybersecurity and data protection and data governance have become really of paramount importance for the BRICS. And also, it's very interesting, observers will have noticed, of course, that last year, the UN, that is the main forum of action for all BRICS members, agreed as the main and the only legitimate form of action at international level. The UN adopted the first Convention Against Cybercrime, which is somehow the result of 10 years of lobbying and organizations of the BRICS grouping. And so it's interesting to see that over the past 10 years, over the past decade, there has been an increase of coordination, discussion on digital cooperation, but also of digital sovereignty. And this is something that we have somehow traced in this recently published book that is now available since December, actually available on the publisher's website in open access. So on Cambridge University Press, you will find it. We analyze various examples of initiatives, of policies, of narratives emerging from the BRICS grouping about digital sovereignty, and we take an agnostic approach to it. So we analyze it as the capacity to understand, develop, and regulate effective digital technology to exercise agency, power, and control over digital assets. And that is the kind of thinking that has informed our work then on data sovereignty, which is also something we have recently published at the end of last year, ahead of the starting of the preparation of this year works led by the Brazilian presidency of the BRICS grouping. And so we've seen data sovereignty as an evolution, actually as a species of the genus of digital sovereignty. So the capacity to understand how data, and in particularly personal data, are processed, by whom, for what reasons, and the capacity to develop data processing technologies and to effectively regulate them, to retain self-determination and control over such technology. And this indeed is essential to maintain, to preserve, to protect personal data, to maintain cybersecurity, but also to take advantage of the economic value of data, be them personal data or not, and to increase strategic autonomy. Now, it's interesting, and we stress this in several publications, chiefly this last one, is that this can be done without jeopardizing free flows of data, but by regulating them. Actually, this is something that we started, is a discussion we started some years ago with our friend and late colleague Danilo Doneda. Actually, it is a very important paper for me because this is the last one that we published with Danilo before he passed away 3 years ago. And this is the starting of our discussion on what could be the elements that we can distill from BRICS frameworks in order to foster legal interoperability amongst the BRICS. And that is something that we have expanded in this book that will be published in 2 months by Oxford University Press. The elements that we discussed with Danilo were seminal to the discussion that we then developed in this paper, in this volume, and we dedicated to him this volume. Many of the authors of the book are here today with us as panelists. And actually, the conclusion of this volume, where we distill also some normative and operational principles, and also we put forward some model contractual clauses to favor the international data transfers amongst the BRICS, is precisely that at the same time, it's possible to be data sovereign and also to foster digital cooperation. Actually, this should be a priority for not only BRICS countries, but for any country. And this becomes extremely relevant in light of last year's commitment of the BRICS grouping, the expanded BRICS grouping, to design a fair, equitable, and global framework for data governance, including cross-border data flows. And this is the aim of this is precisely they somehow take literally our research in terms of favoring interoperability of data policy frameworks as an objective of the grouping. This is an extremely relevant point that I think it's essential to start our discussion of today. This I want to conclude also to provide a little bit of hints of what could be these normative and operational principles that we have suggested. Of course, the normative ones that can distill from the BRICS frameworks that are already effective are pretty much the same that you can find elsewhere. What is particularly interesting for me are the what we call the operational ones, so the effective oversight, secure and data transfers, privacy by design, the design of the technology with privacy and data protection within it, and the promotion of privacy-enhancing technologies, indeed also through digital public infrastructures, software and hardware that embeds data control within the technology. And then something very important, what we call facilitative regulation. So the fact of investing strategically and also considering particularly valuable the industry that are based on data-intensive technologies and should be helped on the one hand and steered towards the kind of constitutional values we want to promote. We also put forward some a proposal from model contractual clauses. Of course, these are very long. It's a 20 pages document. I invite everyone interested in this debate to access them. The conclusion of the book is already available thanks to the gracious permission of Oxford University Press on our website, cyberbrics.info. You can also use this mini URL to directly access the text and read our conclusion. And with this, I thank you very much. And I start giving the floor to our partners from the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. As mentioned, we will have, unfortunately, we cannot have the live presence of Carolina van der Weijl with us, but she was so kind to record a video this morning and send us her remarks in this 5-minute video that we can share now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luca, for the invitation to take part in this debate on data governance in the BRICS. First, let me congratulate you and all the participants in this webinar. I wish I would be able to join you online, but today we will hopefully finalize the first document on data economy in the BRICS history. This is, as you can imagine, a huge challenge, and we are working hard to get this done. The Brazilian presidency of BRICS has dedicated a considerable space for issues related to the core of the digital economy. AI is a priority in our presidency, and there will be numerous documents that will emerge in different areas, aiming at improving innovation and development of AI capabilities. Governance of the digital economy is another issue that will be central to the Brazilian presidency. As you are aware, we are working to define a consensus among BRICS on issues related to AI governance, as a way to ensure that not only security and human rights will be safeguarded in the AI future, but also development concerns will be addressed in dealing with AI governance. And then there is the work being done on data economy. In 2022, the e-commerce task force was upgraded to the Digital Economy Working Group within BRICS. Among the areas of cooperation we've agreed with is sharing experiences on regulatory matters related to the digital economy. Data is at the core of the digital economy. It is the fundamental element upon which the structure of the digital world is based. As such, it is also a key component of any development strategy for the 21st century economy. One of the main challenges in addressing data governance is the different aspects that come to attention when raising the issue. The security aspect, as well as the personal data protection dimension, are important considerations that have been under the spotlight, and for good reasons. However, data governance aspects related to development policies have been somehow neglected up until recently. The implementation of the digital transformation of the industry depends above all on data governance policies. However, there is a lack of minimal international consensus on core issues related to data, and we have been witnessing a proliferation of national regulations in the data area. In the last 5 years alone, around 2,000 new data regulations have been adopted in different countries, within BRICS and beyond BRICS. In addition, nearly 123 trade agreements contain commitments in the area of cross-border data flows. This fragmentation is a challenge for the integration of developing countries into the global digital economy. It hinders this landscape for investment and limits the insertions of MSMEs from the global south in the global value chains. The Brazilian presidency of BRICS has decided to address the challenge of talking about data in a structured form. The document under negotiations will be the first effort to try to set a roadmap among BRICS to improve aspects of the data economy. It brings on board issues related to cross-border data flows, industrial policy, competition, digital public infrastructure, consumer protection, and digital trade, together with more operational topics such as data measurement, data portability, and data taxonomies, while also taking into account concerns related to personal data protection, intellectual property rights, and cybersecurity. This is a document, and I stress again, under negotiation, that hopes to create a cooperation agenda within BRICS in order to not only advance the data economy in our countries, but also to leverage the BRICS in the wider global debate on data and digital governance. I hope that in the future we'll be able to engage fully on different aspects of the data economy among BRICS. And I hope we'll be able to count on the expertise of all of you to engage our governments, industries, academia, and civil society organizations on the deepening of understanding of the challenges and opportunities in the global digital economy. Good work to you all, and thank you very much.
Very good to have this extremely fresh news about the evolving works of the BRICS working group on data governance and data economy. It is expected to produce the first document on data economy in the BRICS. Very happy that we can contribute with this debate, with our research, to inform the working group on data governance about the challenges and the opportunities that exist. And no one better than the regulator can tell us what are the challenges and the opportunities that we can face. And so I would like to give the floor to opening the works of today to our friend Jerzy Miola. He has been recently appointed as one of the new directors of the ANPD. He has also a long-standing careers in both the public sector and academic sector. So it's really good to see you with us today. It's really good to see also some fresh air within the Brazilian regulator. And also it's good to have you today to tell us a little bit of all the regulations and also novelties that are to some extent involving ANPD. So please, Jerzy, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being with us.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank the FGV and Professor Luca Belli for the kind invitation to be here today. It is an honor to participate in the discussion about data governance in the BRICS context, which is a discussion that has, as we know, direct implications for our economies, societies, and the protection of individual rights. From my point of view, BRICS countries have been playing an increasingly prominent role in digital governance. So in the field of personal data protection, BRICS members have made significant regulatory advances in data protection in the recent years, which include the enactment of new laws, updates to existing frameworks, and the establishment of dedicated regulatory authorities, such as the Brazilian Data Protection Authority, of which I'm a member of the board of directors, as Professor Belli mentioned. In the international level, one example of the work of the BRICS is last year's Summit Kazan Declaration, which reflects a collective commitment to collaborate in building a fair, inclusive, and equitable global framework for data governance, which includes the subject of cross-border flows of data. So this initiative, among others, signals an important agreement around the intent to take an assertive role in setting standards that at the same time enable developing countries to harness the opportunities of a global digital economy while protecting rights, such as privacy and personal data rights. So cross-border data transfers are, of course, as both Professor Belli and Carolina from the Brazilian Foreign Ministry mentioned, are a key component of a potential framework for data governance. There are, of course, important practical challenges for enabling international data transfers across different countries and legal systems. And the rise of technologies which operate on a transnational level, such as global platforms and generative artificial intelligence technologies, further increases the complexity of cross-border data flows. So to address these challenges, cross-regulatory cooperation among BRICS countries is, from my point of view, essential. Given the regulatory diversity within the bloc, dialogue is, of course, crucial to align principles and ensure that the way forward in the construction of a shared data governance regime actually promotes protection of personal data securely and efficiently across all member countries. The National Data Protection Authority of Brazil, ANPD, has been and intends to be an active contributor to this international cooperative effort in respect to cross-border data flows. Brazil's General Data Protection Law, the LGPD, provides for several legal instruments that allow international transfers of personal data, ranging from adequacy decisions that recognize a country's appropriate level of protection to the use of specific contractual clauses and global corporate rules, for instance. Last year, in 2024, the Brazilian Data Protection Authority, ANPD, approved a regulation on international data transfers, which operationalizes several of these instruments and establishes safeguards and procedures for such operations. So key measures of this regulation include the definition of the Brazilian set of standard contractual clauses, which we expect will facilitate the conduction of cross-border data transfers in compliance with the standards that are set up by the Brazilian data protection law. This regulation also establishes, for instance, procedures and requirements for adequacy decisions. And in that front, we at ANPD expect to conclude our first adequacy decision very soon, still this year in 2025. We hope we'll have some news in the forthcoming months. This regulation reaffirms Brazil's commitment to the idea that the free flow of data can happen combined with trust, and that the promotion of economic, social, and technological development can take place respecting data subjects' rights. So for cross-border data transfers to happen in those terms, I also believe that we need to strengthen regulatory interoperability and convergence. And within the BRICS context, I believe the prospects for such convergence are extremely positive. Despite several differences, as the article that Professor Belli mentioned here, authored with Professor Doneta, highlights, there is a growing convergence around common principles such as consent, accountability, transparency, and security. And convergence around the development of common tools for international data transfers, such as model contractual clauses and bilateral, multilateral agreements, can also facilitate cross-border data flows while ensuring legal certainty, the protection of rights, and respecting, of course, each country's specificity. I believe that the quest for convergence among BRICS countries in the field of data protection is not only a decisive step towards strengthening global digital governance, but also a strategic opportunity to promote sustainable and inclusive development for our countries and societies. And also a fair, inclusive, and equitable governance of data, as mentioned in the Kazan Declaration, is also crucial for our countries and societies to harness the benefits of artificial intelligence. AI technologies often involve the collection and processing of data across multiple countries as a digital global supply chain with very concrete applications. If you think of, for instance, data centers that are part of these global supply chains, this underscores the urgency of international cooperation to establish frameworks that enable secure data processing related to AI. And again, the Brazilian Data Protection Authority has also been taking an active role in the field of AI. The Brazilian General Data Protection Law offers important safeguards that apply to AI systems regarding data protection and privacy, and to data processing in automated decision-making. And based on this existing law, we at the Brazilian Data Protection Authority have already decided important cases related to the compliance of the processing of personal data for training AI models with the Brazilian Data Protection Law. And ANPD has also established the regulation of personal data processing for AI and automated decisions as one of its priorities in the 2025-2026 regulatory agenda. So the aim here is to provide clear guidelines on what is expected in respect to data protection in AI training and data processing for AI training. Last year, we had a public consultation about the possible regulation, and we intend again to soon advance with a proposal in that matter, hopefully this year. ANPD has also recently launched a regulatory sandbox on artificial intelligence and data protection, which will be implemented in the next 20 months. So in partnership with academia, and I value very much this interaction in the reflections that we're having here today, but also in practical terms from the perspective of a regulator. So in partnership with academia, we are setting up a collaborative experimentation between the regulator and regulated entities and other interested parties to test the conformity of AI innovations with the Brazilian law in a controlled and safe environment. And Brazil, as you probably know, is also discussing the enactment of a comprehensive legislation directed to the promotion of an ethical and responsible use of AI. This possible legislation was approved in Senate last year and is now being discussed in the House. And this is a bill that, from my point of view, balances the need to simultaneously protect rights potentially impacted by AI development, but also to enable enjoying the benefits of technological innovation. And I think there are two main features in the bill that exemplify that balance. One is its risk-based approach. So it creates obligations according to the levels of risk generated by AI systems, and also establishes a regulatory governance by a national system of AI regulation and governance, which respects sectorial expertise, which I think is crucial for that purpose. And it also creates the need for a coordinating authority that is capable of producing general guidelines and build convergence among sectorial regulators. And the Brazilian Data Protection Authority in that context is being discussed as this possible coordinating authority for this system. And from our point of view, it makes sense and can be a contribution of the Brazilian DPA, given the fact that personal data is absolutely central for several, if not most, AI models in specific sectors. So building convergence in that respect will be extremely important. And of course, our accumulated experience in the field of AI and familiarity with the technology due to the enforcement and regulation of data protection rights. So as in data protection, to conclude, I believe that is also in AI, the need for the construction of common understandings based on cooperation and respect for each country's specificities is absolutely essential to ensuring a digital environment that is secure, dynamic, and centered on human dignity, as well as capable of promoting social and economic development. The BRICS and dialogues among BRICS countries, such as this one today, are certainly crucial for us to advance in pursuing that challenge. I wish you all an excellent event, and thanking again Professor Luca Belli for the invitation and the opportunity of being here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Yergemiola, for your participation. Very interesting I think it's very good also for our friends that are following the debate to understand how many initiatives are now in the making in Brazil, and also the key role that probably ANPD they already has and is called to increase probably even more in the forthcoming years. So it's very good to monitor all the initiatives that you mentioned, the sandboxes, the elaboration of a new regulation on AI and data protection, and of course the bill that is being discussed in the Congress, which is probably one of the most relevant initiatives at the moment in Brazil. Now to start our debate, our first segment of debate with our speakers, I would like to start with our friend Ahmad Binder from the Digital Cooperation Organization. As the very name of the Digital Cooperation Organization tells, they work on digital cooperation and to facilitate this amongst members, and also to design tools, solution that, amongst other things, could facilitate data transfers. So it's great to have you with us, Ahmad. Also, the Digital Cooperation Organization is headquartered in Saudi Arabia, which is one of the new BRICS members, so also particularly relevant for this from this perspective. So Ahmad, thank you very much for being with us today. Could you let us understand a little bit more what are the type of solution that DCO is proposing to facilitate data transfers?
Well, thank you very much, Professor Luca, and it's really inspirational to have such experts, data governance experts in the room, and the first two interventions. And I think it's you guys have pretty much covered what are the bases of the work that we are proposing for the DCO member states. But to start with, Digital Cooperation Organization is an intergovernmental organization that focuses on the inclusive and sustainable growth of digital economy. We have 16 member states. Some of them are the new BRICS members. Some of them are on the way. But we represent similar economies as to BRICS as well. Our work on digital cooperation could not have started without addressing the value of data, and especially the cross-border data flows amongst the member states, as they are essential part of the digital economy, especially for the inclusive growth of the economy and of the developing countries. Having said that, we also recognize the legitimate concerns about privacy, data security, national security, sovereignty, etc. So what the approach that we took, or that we are taking for the DCO member states, is to balance the openness with safeguards and enable trust-based interoperability data governance frameworks. So as we are aware, I don't think that I need to go into the details of what is available right now. So we have adequacy at the highest level from the GDPR, where you have where the Data Protection Authority recognizes the other countries as adequate, and there are a whole bunch of procedures that is attached to that. In absence of an adequacy, or on the way to adequacy, we have other widely recognized mechanisms, including the legal agreements, which Carolina mentioned earlier. There are hundreds of trade agreements with the data protection clauses in them. Then there are binding corporate rules and standard contractual clauses that could be used as alternative. Codes of conduct or certification mechanisms are there. So what we did is to start our work, and we were 10 member states at that time. A couple of years ago, we commissioned a study just to dive deep into what are the data governance frameworks across the DCO member states, and how do those frameworks affect or limit the cross-border data flows. By the way, the study is available on the DCO website, and it is quite informative in terms of the diversity of regulations amongst the DCO member states, and a huge diversity in the motivations to regulate data or to govern data, and how does that affect the cross-border data flows. So then, as a part of recommendations from a multilateral organization, organization, we came up with the conclusion, which everybody else in the world is coming up with that conclusion, to have interoperability mechanisms to facilitate trusted cross-border data flows amongst the DCO member states. And a step forward from that is, and not so we call it the DCO interoperability mechanism, as I would mention a few elements of that, but also we are focusing on how different interoperability mechanisms are interoperable with each other. So we do not create silos of, you know, a CBPR or other mechanisms that are not interoperable and recognized by others. So we looked at whatever was available from GDPR to CBPR to ASEAN framework to OECD guidelines, etc. And we looked at what are the strengths and weaknesses or some of those mechanisms. So on one hand, we have mechanisms with legal certainty and high level of protection. On the other hand, we have mechanisms that are more flexible and business friendly. There are mechanisms that are certification based that adds a level of protection, yet a bureaucratic procedure to those mechanisms. And then we have certain culturally aligned mechanisms where it's between the countries who are closer to the value on the values to each other. The weaknesses, of course, some are rigid, one-sided, for example, in terms of adequacy recognitions. Some are slow, limited participation, for example. Some are completely vague and non-binding. So we did an analysis on all those mechanisms, and we then thought we should capitalize on the strengths of all those mechanisms that are there and learn from the weaknesses from the existing frameworks. So this leads us to the starting point of creating the interoperability mechanism. As you would all expect, the first thing is to provide a common framework or common set of principles for the 16 DCO member states to agree on, and that could be a starting point for any other work that we would do. So we looked at, as I said, we did not reinvent the wheel. We looked at the privacy principles that are around there, and then we applied two lenses to them. The first lens was to map them across the DCO member state frameworks and see which country or which member states adopts which principles and how. The other lens that we applied to them was that those principles were created a while ago. So therefore, we looked at it from the lens of emerging technologies. So, for example, the accuracy in the other frameworks or data minimization in the other frameworks, we rephrased them and to data relevance and quality. Because if we minimize the data to an extent that we will not be able to use them for AI, then it would lose the purpose. So again, we're going to make these principles available on the DCO website soon. We have recently presented these principles to our council, which is our governing body, which meets once a year. And they were adopted by the DCO Council as the baseline or for any work on data governance that we do from there. So that's an achievement that we did earlier this year. Now coming very quickly into what are our thoughts around the interoperability mechanism. So first, once we have established these baselines data privacy principles, then we use these principles to come up with a structured approach which is similar to a level of equivalence recognition, and in absence of equivalence recognition, how could the data be transferred? So we have created an idea of accreditation. The accreditation is the government to government or the government level accreditation of the sufficiency of the data protection in the DCO member states. So as you would see in the global CBPR, we have proposed to create a body or a function within the DCO that would advise to this body that would constitute the DCO representatives from the DCO member states to map the data protection maturity or data governance regulation maturity of a member states against a set of criteria. And then there would be a set of countries that would be accredited as or they would be certified as accredited members to this framework. So between those member states, we will consider the adequate level of data protection, and we will work with the data protection authorities or within the local laws on recognizing those member states as equivalent or adequate or whatever you can call it, and the data can flow freely from them. Secondly, as Professor Luca mentioned, there's a focus on the model contractual clauses. We looked at the model contractual clauses that exist. We looked at the framework amongst the DCO member states, and we have proposed or developed the model contractual clauses for the DCO interoperability mechanism. Again, this also stems from the principles that we have adopted, and these model contractual clauses would then provide an alternate means of sharing data amongst the businesses. So, in the absence of equivalent or accreditation between the DCO member states, we will use these clauses for the data transfers amongst the entities. Now, how are we going to implement these clauses in the regulatory frameworks of the DCO member states? This is something that we have started to work on, looking at each regulatory framework and see how we can embed these model contractual clauses, because many personal data protection laws that exist and many countries who are on this journey have some sort of standard contractual clauses. So we are going to develop some framework of how do we acknowledge these. These are the two layers of what we have devised the interoperability mechanisms. The details are going to be carved out, and this is so our initial idea was to put this proposal on the table with the member states, get their consent on agreement on the principles and consent on developing this interoperability mechanism, and now we would be starting negotiations between the member states. But again, as I said, this is one of the purposes. The other purpose is to contribute to the global best practice. So what we have learned from what is happening from the other groups and how we can create synergies between what we are creating and what already exists and what other groups like BRICS and other group of countries are coming, so we can realize a dream of global interoperability or global ease in the flow of data across borders. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Ahmad. And let me just also remind all speakers to try to stick in the 4 or 5 minutes to reply to the questions so that we can have a more dynamic flow. This is very good to have all this information from you, Ahmad, both with regard to the synergies and the kind of interoperability amongst interoperability mechanism that you are promoting. This, I'm sure that we will come back to this in the Q&A. And actually, let me also remind our audience that in the description of this webinar on YouTube, you will have the link to Sli.do, the app we use to ask questions. So if you have any questions, please include them on Sli.do, and we will use them in the Q&A in some minutes. Now let's get into the national frameworks that we want to analyze. When we speak about data sovereignty, Russia is frequently one of the first countries that comes to mind in discussions. Russia has been one of the first to regulate data localization, and but also maintaining at the same time the possibility to have international data transfer. So it's very interesting. It's a very interesting example to study. We have the pleasure to have here today Katerina Martinova from the Higher School of Economics. Katya, it's a great pleasure to have you again with us. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Professor Luca. Yes, you're absolutely right. Russia is an example of one of these early stage or the first early birds of data localization requirement jurisdictions, and we have it for almost a decade, since September 2015, when the federal law was amended to introduce the obligation of data operators to ensure localization within Russian servers all the activities with processing of the data of the Russian citizens, with additional authorities for Roskomnadzor, the Russian regulator, to manage to oversee these activities. And I will, of course, after that, we have some further developments, and I will very briefly speak of two major and more recent developments in this field. The first one is the circle of amendments to the federal law in December 2022, when the amendments were introduced, particularly with respect to the biometric data. And it was quite a sensitive question, discussed very intensively in the Russian parliament, with the given priority to protection of personal data and given additional guarantees for these types of data, biometric data. And what we see now in the amendments to the federal law is that only facial image and voice samples are considered to be permitted types of biometric data to be collected and stored by the operators, while, for example, genomic information and some other types of biometric data are prohibited from collection. And we see additional guarantees, additional measures for the subjects of such types of personal data to get the information on all the actions related to the collection, storage, and activities with this type of data, and also special type of consent, which is required for this particular type of data, and the right to revoke the consent at any time with almost immediate effect. And also what is important, a special system, the so-called unified biometric system, was introduced. So all this type of data is encrypted. And for example, operators such as banks, which collect such types of data, are obliged to transfer in the encrypted form of this data to this unified system, to this register, so that only here the biometric data could be stored. And what is important, this particular type of data cannot be transferred internationally. So this is the restriction on cross-border transfer of biometric data with respect to Russian citizens and Russian people's biometric data. And another amendment which I think I should mention is a recent one. We have a new law from November 2024, which addresses this problem of increased accountability and security, which you were speaking about in the introduction to this webinar. And for us here in Russia, it is particularly important because we have the enormous number of cyber attacks on Russian servers. We see the increasing number of cyber operations and malicious use of ICTs with respect to Russian servers, and of course that could not be addressed by the Russian parliament, and we have these amendments to the federal law from November of last year, which increase the responsibility of Russian operators, telecom companies, IT companies, everybody who deals with personal data in the first place, to ensure additional means of cybersecurity with respect to personal data, also to ensure that no leakages can be technically done, and also increased responsibility of these operators, including additional measures of responsibility in case if something happens with the personal data due to non-compliance with the obligations under the federal law on personal data. So we see the a bit intensification of regulation in this field, but it seems that it is based on the very legitimate interests of providing additional security safeguards for the personal data. And speaking about international transfer of data, we see that Russia has been actively involved in building some trusted mechanisms of cross-border data transfers, particularly with its friendly states within the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and with China in the first place, and also I guess that within the BRICS bloc also it is a very important line of the work of the Russian regulator to build this mechanism of trusted cross-border transfer, taking into account, of course, all these restrictions which we have in national legislation. So I will stop here and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Katerina, for this excellent overview. Also, these very timely updates on the very recent amendments and new norms introduced in Russia. Now, let's move to another very relevant BRICS country, India, that has, to some extent, introduced data localization in some sectors, like the banking sector, over the past years. Then it somehow suggested that this could have been the general choice, but then reversed this with the new Personal Data Protection, Digital Personal Data Protection Act that has a very liberal approach to data transfers. So it's very good to have with us for the first time Sli.do Mohandas that has been dedicating some time with her research to this issue. Thank you very much for being with us, Sli.do. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Luca, for inviting me for this event and to meet these great people. So yes, just on the topic, I just want to start with going back a little bit on we reached to the Data Protection Act. So there were multiple versions of the Data Protection. I would call it Data Protection Act. There were different iterations, different names for it as well. So it started from 2018. So initially there was till 2021 draft of the Act. The data was divided into two parts, sensitive and personal data. And sensitive personal data required more responsibilities to data fiduciaries, which are another name that we can get, data controllers. So there was more responsibility. I included, I think, the data localization provision came in terms of when using sensitive personal data, you should be, and different provisions of different versions of the bill spoke about data localization with particular respect to sensitive personal data. With the final version of the bill, final draft and the act itself, this division between personal data and sensitive personal data has been removed. So now we just have personal data, and there's just this new class of fiduciaries called significant data fiduciaries that have come up, where these existing additional responsibilities could be given. But again, as the Act itself leaves a lot for the government to decide and the Data Protection Authority, the Data Protection Board to decide. So the Act itself is kind of, as you mentioned, a bit more comprehensive, but it also leaves a lot of space for things to happen as and when things develop. So this very recently, I think in Jan 2025, I guess Jan or Feb 2025, the data protection rules were released. So these were the draft rules. So even though the rules are there, they're still a draft version. They were released. They were open for consultation. And in the part of that rule, there was a bit of a discordance between what the Act said about data localization and what the rule said. So as per Section 16 of the Act, it spoke about a way in which to restrict the transfer of data as we have a negative list, and there was a negative list of countries would be given out, and then there would be restrictions based on that. While the rules itself kind of bring out a white list or a positive list of countries. Again, going back to the issue with significant data fiduciaries as well. Most of the responsibilities go to them. And again, the bill, the Act kind of defines significant data fiduciaries as a group of companies that can be considered as significant data fiduciaries based on the volume of the data, the sensitivity of the data, issues with the sensitivity with regard to the public order, sovereignty of India, and I think peace and security of the country as well. So it's very difficult to know which companies or which data fiduciaries would be considered significant data fiduciaries, and this localization requirement would be there. Because again, if you think of, if it is going to be just sensitive to data, for example, if it is a small company that's working, like a startup that's working on children's data, and they're considered significant data fiduciaries, would they be considered in the same bracket as maybe a bigger company that's working on the same issue? So I think the issues also with regard to how open the definitions are and how much is left to the government to decide later, as in when another version of the rules come out, or again when government notifications come out as well. So yes, I'm sure if you have a follow-up question, but this I think is what my summary in terms of where we are right now with regard to data localization and data sovereignty with the draft of the Data Protection Act and the most recent draft rules that were released.
Very good. Thank you very much for this week, and also for highlighting the key role that the Data Protection Board, the India Data Protection Board, the new regulator that has not been established yet, will have to play in defining, in implementing this framework. And now let's move to another very relevant BRICS country, China, where the regulator, the Cyberspace Administration of China, has been adopting a lot of norms and implementing them over the past years. So very good to have again with us Wei Wang to discuss these issues, and particularly to what extent China has been able to implement its legislation in order to regulate data transfer and reconcile them with its considerable preoccupation for data security. Please, Wei, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks so much, Luca, for the invitation, and thanks a lot for giving me quite a few opportunity to join quite a few webinars as well. Basically, I think China's regulation of cross-border data transfers reflects a mix of data security and sovereignty. All we may know that the central framework in China is the so-called three law framework, including the Personal Information Protection Law, that is PIPO, Cybersecurity Law, and the Data Security Law. And at the core, the PIPO mandates the personal information handlers adopt strong internal safeguards. This includes, for example, encryption, de-identification, risk assessment, where the appointment of data protection officers. This sort of obligations go beyond general principles and impose highly specific requirements. I think this construct with quite a few other more flexible models in other jurisdictions. And when it comes to data leaving China or data outbound transfer, the PIPO creates a structured or multi-channel system for cross-border transfer. For example, its Article 38 sets out three pathways. The first is a security assessment. The second is a certification, and the final is the SCCs, as we mentioned in the the previous speakers. This approach is more prescriptive than what we see in some other jurisdictions as well. Critically, Article 4 of the PIPO adds a localization requirement of the operators of the critical information infrastructure, or those handling large volumes or certain large volumes of data must store that data within China. If they need to export those data, they must first undergo a security assessment. In this regard, when it comes to personal data transfer, we can look at the PIPO only, but in terms of data transfer, including non-personal data, we have to look at the cybersecurity law, data security law, and the PIPO comprehensively. That said, recent regulatory developments have introduced some flexibility. For example, back in 2014, I think March 2014, the Cyberspace Administration of China issued the new rules, not as just cross-border data transfer rules. These rules clarified exemptions for common business scenarios. It's a sort of scenario-based approach this time. That introduced a negative list model for in free trade zones. For example, in China, there are quite a few free trade zones that adopt some specific rules or different from the national level regulations. The data not on this sort of negative list can move more freely, reducing compliance burdens in low-risk contexts while maintaining this strict oversight for the most important data. This system is not domestic. Even foreign companies handling Chinese personal data or personal information must appoint a representative in China and to register with regulators. This mirrors the GDPR's reach, but is implemented through a top-down compliance model. Enforcement is also managed through a network of agencies. The CAC coordinates it, but the sector-specific regulator also have rules like China's central banking for financial data, or there is no single data protection authority. Still, the institution design allows deep regulatory reach across sectors, and also sanctions are steep, up to 5% of the annual turnover, or 50 million yuan. And the public, I think the most interesting part is that China also allows public interest litigations. That's a sort of mass litigation system, which may be brought by prosecutors or authorized organization. So China's region reconciles data transfers with security by embedding them within a regulatory sandboxing architecture, I I would prefer to say the law permits data to leave China, but only when the risks are addressed on terms set up by the state first, through clear formal mechanisms that emphasize security, oversight, and legal adequacy. Yes, I think I will stop here. I look very much forward to comments and discussions later.
Very good. I mean, I think the direction is going in a very good, the discussion is going in a very good direction, because we are providing some of the key elements of the various frameworks that analyze us to first understand the complexity, and second, build up a potential vision for what could be a systemic approach to this issue, right? Based on the BRICS experiences, which is what indeed we have tried to do with our upcoming book on personal data architectures in the BRICS countries. Now let's focus on a second issue. I'm seeing that some questions are popping up in the Sli.do, but I will keep them for the final part on the Q&A. Also because there are questions, a couple of questions, one on data security, the other one on enforcement. But let's keep them for the final round of Q&A. And now let's get into the second main core issue of today, which is automated data processing. And so let's try to briefly understand to what extent BRICS countries or DCO members have already regulated this issue. We have seen with the presentation of Director Yajé Miola that ANPD, the Brazilian Data Protection Authority, has in the pipeline a couple of initiatives, a sandbox initiative, and also a consultation on AI and data protection. Let's try to see first with the DCO and then with the national framework we're analyzing how and to what extent AI and automated data processing can be regulated. So the DCO is designing a policy tool for ethical AI that somehow should bring some answers to these questions. So Ahmad, could you provide us a very brief illustration of what this policy tool could be and how it could be implemented?
Again, thank you, Luca. I'll try to be very brief, as you said. At DCO, again, we started looking at AI from different angles, from AI adoption and readiness angles. So we have developed some policy tools, some tools for AI assessment and readiness for the DCO member states, which is I will not bring them here. And then on the other side, we started looking at AI governance, and the angle that we looked at it from was ethical and responsible AI governance, but from a human rights perspective as well. So what we did was we, again, as a starting point, we looked at the AI landscape, governance landscape across the globe and across the DCO member states. We picked up the similarities, we picked up the best practices, and we developed a report that's going to be published soon on the intersection of AI and human rights across the DCO member states, which has tangible, actionable recommendations for the member states. So from the same process, we picked up, we benchmarked around 14 or 15 global bodies with the ethical AI principles. And we developed our set of principles, ethical AI principles, which are 7 principles. From accountability to privacy to sustainability and environmental protection. And then we said, okay, so we got all the member states agreed on this set of principles, presented it to the council, adopted by the council. And how do we now take one step further and help the DCO member states apply these principles for the ethical AI governance? As we all know, there's one approach, or there are diverse approaches across the globe. Either a self-regulation approach or a prescriptive approach. So we did not get into that discussion because we have left that to the member states to decide, but we rather decided to provide AI system developers and deployers and the member states tool whereby we can pick up the risks that are associated to the breach of certain principles. We mapped those principles into 6 risk categories. For example, if transparency and explainability is principle that needs to be followed, then the transparency deficit and explanation, inadequacy risks, what can that translate into? And then we provide, we almost are in the process of releasing the tool. We are finalizing it. We mapped these risk classes or risk categories into a framework where so for example, privacy vulnerabilities and data protection threats is a risk. What is a risk category? And what is the risk that comes out of a specific risk or a list of risks that come out of this category? For example, unauthorized collection and processing of sensitive information. And then we mapped it against which human right does it infringe upon. So the right to privacy is infringed upon this. So we developed a set of questions that are to be assessed by, so there's a different set by the developers, assessed by the developers and by the deployers to answer about their systems across different risk categories. And based on the responses to those questions that we have designed in this tool, the tool is going to then provide a map of where do these systems stand across those 6 risk categories, from a low level, from 5 to a high level of 25, for example. So we did not stop there. Again, once the tool is made available, you could play around with it and see how it works. Then we developed for each risk level across each category. We developed recommendations across 6 categories. So if what needs to be improved, for example, for the system architecture and design, what needs to be improved in the data management strategies for that AI system, what could be the operational controls that could be put into place, etc., etc. So then the result of this tool is going to be an assessment across those for an AI system across those categories, and then a detailed set of recommendations on the actions that would be taken by the AI system deployers or developers, or by the governments who are assessing certain systems if they are taking a more prescriptive hands-on approach. So we believe that not only by agreeing on principles that as a global best practice, this tool is going to give a hands-on support to the governments and to the AI system to self-assess where do the systems stand in terms of the ethical AI governance. Again, this is one of the things that we are doing for AI. We are working on developing a center of excellence for generative AI and some other initiatives that would come along the way. I hope I kept within my time this time.
Thank you very much, Ahmad. And now let me publicly provide my excuses to Professor Sizwe Nayef, because I forgot to give him the time to provide his remarks on the data transfers and data sovereignty in South Africa. So before we keep our discussion on automated processing, let's just for 1 second come back to the previous discussion, again with my sincerest apologies to Sizwe, on how South Africa, which has been designing a very interesting mix of an open approach to data transfers and a recent more assertive stand on data sovereignty. So what is the result of this cocktail design by South Africa? Thank you very much for being with us. Please, Sizwe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Prof. Bailey. I think South Africa has really shown us a very flexible and, as you said, very open approach to data transfers that is in line with what you could call international best practice. With that having been said, South Africa is trying to come up with data localization policies to try and curb data, in other words, reduce the export of data, and also make use of the data for its own locals. So it's a very interesting mix in the sense that on the one hand, we don't want to stop innovation and we don't want to stop the transfer of data for business sake and other methods. But in the same breath, I think South Africa has also now accepted that just nilly-willy exporting data can also be detrimental to a country, and that one needs to have some efforts to try and localize the data. I'll keep it at that for now.
Excellent. And also, I would like also to share the news that Professor Sidrus Nail, also with Dr. Ahmad Binder, they will be both here with us for CPDP Latam in July as confirmed speakers. So we will be also able to deepen this very important debate with them personally here in exactly 2 months. Now let's try to move again to in building upon what Sidrus was mentioning now, this potential tension between an open international flow of data and the local need to build technology and research using those data, and the possibility to combine them. Now, another very good example, again, of these tensions and potential solutions is Russia, that over the past years has been regulating AI and automated processing of personal data. This is also something we are exploring in our current phase of the Cyber BRICS project dedicated to AI sovereignty in the BRICS. And there are some very interesting elements that I'm pretty sure Ekaterina will be able to share with us. So please, Ekaterina, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. I should start with mentioning that we still don't have a comprehensive AI law, so no federal law on AI, though we have a lot of initiatives, concept, we have the strategy, we have generally the vision of the approach to the regulation, but not a federal law yet, at least a law on the federal level, though we have quite successful local experiments. By local, I mean Moscow experiment in the first place in the healthcare system, where we see how particularly computer vision technology is used as one of the elements of the clinical decision support system. And we have this regulation on how patients' data is anonymized and used for the AI processing and training. And I also would like to share some news about, once again, another recent piece of legislation, the law on the so-called anonymized datasets, which was introduced in August 2024. And these datasets are planned to be launched from September this year, 2025. So we still have to live and see how it will be working in practice. But generally, the idea is to create some centralized, anonymized data sets. And the objectives of this law are threefold. So as they are proclaimed by the initiators, the first one is to ensure exchange of this anonymized data between business and the state. The second one particularly is to train artificial intelligence models in a secure mode, so that they could have access to some big data, but in an anonymized way, supervised by the authorities. And the third one, to reduce the volume of processed personal data, so to increase the security by these requirements on anonymization of personal data. So how it will be working, we have the Ministry of Digital Development, Communication and Mass Media, who will make this list of these types of personal data which should be anonymized and transmitted to these anonymized data sets. And the ministry will send the requests to the operators, to the business, which will have to anonymize and then transfer data to these data sets in a particular way, which is still to be developed in detail. The modalities of this transfer to be developed by the government. And the idea is that the state authorities, the municipal authorities will get access immediately to this anonymized data, and the operators, the business players, the market players will be certified and also will get access to these anonymized data sets, so that to train the artificial intelligence models and also to develop these anonymized transfer of data in a secure way. So again, there are some limitations on the types of data which will be transferred to these data sets. So some sensitive types of data will not be transferred, including the race, nationality, ethnical information on individuals. And also, there are restrictions that these types of data can be processed only within these datasets. So they cannot be recorded, extracted somehow, transferred out from these datasets. So once they are transferred, the ministry will make sure that everything is stored in this anonymized way, in these secured datasets, which will be supervised by the regulator. So I think that might be an interesting initiative to see how it will be working. And yes, maybe it will be another boost for the AI industry, because we have some market initiatives. We have the AI Alliance, which is a group of the key players, very big players, actually, Yandex, Sber, etc. Everybody is very much interested in the development, but these are like obstacles from the personal data legislation, of course, make it a bit difficult to train the models. And I hope that this one solution on these centralized datasets might be a way to overcome some regulatory obstacles. Thank you.
Excellent. Very good also to see how there is a very explicit stance in terms of using data for business and research purposes, which is something that I think is very much a common thread in BRICS countries, this key preoccupation for developmental use of data, and which is also reflected in the statement of Carolina von der Weid of this morning as regards the BRICS data economy working group. Now, let's move again to India, that has been experimenting with digital public infrastructures at any level, including to regulate personal data and to some extent to shape automated data processing and AI. This is also something that we are very hotly debating within our Cyber BRICS project. And I know that friends from CIS have been working on over the past years. So please, Sweta, the floor is yours again.
I think before we can like to answer the question, I also want to give a little bit examples of what are the digital public infrastructures that are there in India. And I think a lot of my research has been on healthcare, so I can give an example from the healthcare sector in India. So for what I think is digital public infrastructure currently in India is more looking at how to digitize data, how to make it accessible, transferable between different between people and also between companies, and also making it easy to share. So, for example, in the case of health data, we have the ABDM, that is the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, with the purpose to digitize health data and to create a health data ID, which is also linked to the national ID, which is the UIDI or the Aadhaar card and the Aadhaar number. So these both numbers are linked, which also makes it easier to verify who the person is. And then this also adds to the digitization of the health records, the transfer of the health records, the way in which people can access the health records with this number, and verification that's happening through Aadhaar. So I think this is one of the examples of how DPI, particularly in health data, is being envisioned. Again, it's still a process. It's something that's relatively new, and it started most effectively during the COVID pandemic. So it's still effectively happening, and it's more currently still a voluntary phase, so people have to opt in for it. But this is one example which I can say from the healthcare sector. Again, in the finance sector as well, there's the Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture, DEPA, which offers like a consent-based framework, and in such a way, again, through data sharing and also through account aggregators that are kind of enabling organizations that enable people to securely share their financial data across banks and industry institutions as well, including insurance companies, and also get the financial services. So I think these are two main digital DPIs that I can give from in terms of sectoral ways. Again, another thing that I've also personally find it very easy is to use is the eKYC or the e-know your customer, with regard to authentication through Aadhaar. So I think these are a few examples of how DPI is being used in India. And again, just going back to the DPI use in India, I think currently, again, because both are relatively new and they're going almost parallelly with the Data Protection Act and the rules, and again, formalizing how the data protection legislation in India will be, along with the act and rules and the government notification that is supposed to come. So while the DPI is still, I think a lot of the provisions right now are more on making sure that the consent mechanism is correct, there's an ease of access of data, there's data security, and I think data protection and more questions on it will come later once the rules and the act itself is kind of very formalized. Just in addition, while we see that there is these potentials for DPI and it has benefited everyone, like including me, there's other ways in which DPI can also, the centralized authentication and something that is very mobile first or like internet first system kind of also has caused a lot of drawbacks. Issues that one of them is the scams. The UPI scams are pretty getting sophisticated. There are some very simple ones in which QR code is swapped, or even very sophisticated ones, which is very difficult to figure out exactly what the scam is happening. So a lot of financial scams are also happening because of this access to a lot of the data that is linked to these DPIs. A second is again in terms of data breaches as well. For example, once all these information that is linked and is also online, there are also questions around what happens when the data gets breached. For example, if there's like an insurance data that's breached or any other vaccination data that's breached, that is also linked not only to the ID that's linked to your health data, but also to your financial data, maybe also with your school and college data as well. So I think that's another issue. While DPI has definitely improved a lot, and there's a lot of questions around data security that needs to be there, including questions around data privacy that go beyond consent and just look at how to make a system in which it's easier to say withdraw consent, change data, make additions, portability as well. So I think, yes, so while data protection is still going to be integrated into it, there's always consent that is integrated from default to like privacy by design. I think there's also need to look at a bit more questions around data privacy, along with how DPI is growing in India.
Thank you very much for this sweet. I think it makes, for those who do not know very well the Indian system and the use of DPIs, of digital public infrastructures, literally as building blocks of the digital transformation of India. This brings a couple of very telling examples. Aadhaar as ID in order to identify individuals, and also DAPA as the data empowerment and protection architecture to try to provide consent to the use of data and to manage consent. But then at the same time, the fact that another digital public infrastructure, UPI, the Uniform Payment Infrastructure, can even facilitate life of scammers, not only of individuals whose of citizens, of Indian citizens that are supposed to benefit from it. So the use of DPI can very much facilitate life, but also brings into the picture a very wide range of additional concerns that become even more pressing when we try to automatize processes, the overall processes. Good, very good. Let's now move to China again and try to understand another very interesting feature of the Chinese approach to data governance and to AI governance, which is the mix of industrial policy together with data protection and cybersecurity as a strategy for regulation. Wei, you are developing a very interesting study with us on this issue, and I think it would be very good to have a little bit of your insight on how this Chinese cocktail plays out.
Sure. Thanks again, Luca, for inviting me to join this excellent research project in terms of AI governance across BRICS jurisdictions as well. But I think I understand the question is it asking me about the mix of cybersecurity, data protection, and AI. So probably this time we'll briefly answer this question from a data protection perspective. Because when it comes to AI regulations in China, we definitely adopt that technology-specific approach or sectoral approach to regulating artificial intelligence in terms of recommendation algorithms, deep sensing technologies together with the generative AI technologies. But as you may know that I'm currently collaborating with some Beijing-based scholars to draft the model AI law, and we will release the very latest very recent version very soon. So please look forward to this as well. So China's regulation of AI and automated data processing or decision making reflects an integrated approach. I mean, when it comes to data protection, cybersecurity, and industrial policy. This strategy is not only reactive, it's developmental, as all we mentioned in the past few minutes. So legally, if we consider data protection, the cornerstone is PIPO for sure. For example, it's Article 24 addressed the decision, automated decision making directly. It requires that such systems operate transparently and fairly, prohibiting unjustified differential treatment, such as price discrimination based on user profiling, and mandates that the user be given opt-out mechanisms and meaningful explanation when their rights are impacted by algorithmic decisions or automated decisions. And this legal regulation sits within a broader policy context because since 2015, China has pursued a national big data strategy, evaluating data to the status of so-called production factor or productive element in 2022, alongside land, labor, and capital. And this goal is to build a kind of data elements market, a structured system to value, trade, and utilize data at the scale. This has led to the emergence of major data exchanges. We have stock exchanges, but China, we have data exchanges. For example, in Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, and Guiyang, where transactional volumes are rising rapidly. But Shanghai, for example, alone reported over 5 million in transaction back in 2024. These exchanges support AI development for sure by facilitating access to structural, vetted, or monetizable data sets. They operate under a hybrid governance model, market-driven but state-guided, with varying levels of regulatory clarity. For example, Shanghai has implemented mandatory third-party compliance assessment at a product level disclosures, but others like in Beijing or Guiyang are still evolving. This infrastructure directly supports AI industrialization. It allows firms to access large volumes of standardized data, crucial for model training, for example, while ensuring that a sort of circulation is compliant with data protection and cybersecurity rules. Very important or sensitive flows are often regulated within whitelist or negative list mechanisms, or through some privacy enhanced technologies like trusted execution environments, which preserve privacy during cross-border or cross-sectoral exchanges. This institutionalization of data intermediation is also very important. Entities like data merchants or brokers help structure and de-risk transactions by handling anonymization, valuation, or compliance. At the same time, China built the National Data Administration as a sort of economic regulator. It was formed back in 2023. It has started standardizing those rules. For example, in April 2025, it released model contracts to formalize common data transactions covering provision, processing, fusion, and brokerage, providing this sort of legal certainty for scaling and secure data sharing. At the platform level, entities that qualify gatekeepers, I understand that this is hugely, hotly debated in the European Union, but China embedded this data keeping rules within the PIPO. The entities that qualified as gatekeepers, that means the largest scale internet platforms with complex business models, are subject to enhanced algorithmic accountability. They must establish, for example, independent oversight, publish private annual reports, and ensure that their algorithmic practices align with cybersecurity and public interest goals. To be sure, China's regulation of AI, when it comes to data protection, is not a solo. It is a holistic region where data governance That means data protection and cybersecurity and industrial planning and enforcement converge. This basically somehow encourages data-driven innovation, but embeds it in a clearly regulated system. Yeah, I will stop here. Thank you.
Very good way, as usual, very detailed. And I think it's very interesting to study the Chinese approach because of the clear intention to leverage the economic and strategic potential in data, institutionalizing this approach not only through the adoption of policies and creation of new institutions, but also to explicit industrial policy and also policy experimentation. So this is very, very interesting to know. Now let's come back to Professor Sizwe again. Sizwe, as you were mentioning before, South Africa is trying to combine openness to data transfers with a more recent approach, a more assertive approach to data sovereignty, and something that emerged very recently, as of last year, with the new new cloud policy, is this willingness of the South African government to expand this cloud industry, to leverage it as a key pillar for AI expansion. So how is South Africa combining personal data protection with this new policy objective to expand the cloud industry?
Thank you, Prof. Luca. I think South Africa is trying to mix legislation. For instance, our POPIA, our Protection of Personal Information Act, together with policy approaches which are having an Afrocentric approach, a little bit of a BRICS approach, a little bit of everything. Of late, South Africa has been trying to develop AI policies, and then a couple of months later, AI strategies. I think one of the most important things is trying to bring together data protection as well as AI regulation. There have been calls from numerous sectors that organizations like the Information Regulator must expand its mandate and not just be limited to data protection per se, but to also regulate artificial intelligence in that perspective, and also to some extent also regulate the use of cloud, because currently it's all just policy. It is not law, it is all just policy. So I think the correct approach going forward is to try and see how we can mold policy and legislation together so that one has a unified approach. At the moment, it's a little bit complicated. It's seemingly, there's some silos. There's the Department of Communication busy doing something. Then there's the Department of Justice doing something on cybersecurity with the state security. And then we have this independent information regulator that supposedly should be dealing with everything relating to personal information / data and access to information. So some very exciting times in South Africa. And I think in the next 6 months to 18 months, we will start seeing some concrete direction on AI as well as cloud and data governance.
Very good to have these very recent updates, and indeed also stress the relevance of the cloud industry, which is something of a gray area. Typically in terms of regulation, there is policy in promotion of cloud industry, but as we are starting to highlight in our research of the Cyber BRICS project, and then we will have in the next month some very interesting news about studies of cloud industry that we are starting to develop. This is a crucial element of AI, but so far still very subject to very few specific regulation, at least cloud servers. It's something that in Brazil, for instance, has been recently the object of some bill proposals in the Congress, but it is to some extent regulated by other type of regulation, for instance, sectoral cybersecurity regulation, but there is no dedicated regulation. There are usually only policies. Now, this brings us back to some of our considerations of the complexity to regulate data, to visualize how to translate data governance principles into concrete actions. We have had a very interesting debate with our speakers over the past almost hour and a half. Now let's try to check a couple of questions that have been included by those who are following us on Sli.do. And again, next 20 minutes, let's use them to try to have this debate, with this dynamic debate, leveraging the questions put by our audience. So the first one is, what are the limits in terms of enforcement of the framework you analyze, both at the national and global level? The second one is, are there good practices on information security in the BRICS countries? And then, well, that is a very general one on how BRICS are regulating data, but I think we have already provided a very good list of examples of how BRICS are regulating data. So let's try to focus on these two questions. So which kind of good practices or bad practices, if you have any, in terms of information security from BRICS countries, and then these other on the limits of enforcement in the national as well as proposed international frameworks. Who wants to start? Well, maybe I see Professor Ciso's now smiling, and as I know very well that he is probably the only one here, and one of the very few people I know that has a long-standing experience, not only in academia, but also as a regulator, as a former regulator and a practitioner. So maybe no one better than you, Ciso, has a very good idea of what could be the limits of, if any, of enforcement.
Thank you, Prof. Luca. I think the question of enforcement is a very, very, very important question. It's always nice to come up with laws. It's always nice to come up with policies. It's nice setting up regulators and giving them powers to do certain things. But when it becomes crunch time, I think that is when things are really happening. For instance, in South Africa, the last 12 months, it's been serious crunch time. The information regulator really showing its teeth, giving out enforcement notices to the private sector and also the public sector. If you ask me, the worst infringers of data protection is the public sector. That's obviously something I couldn't say in the past, but having that academic freedom now, I can safely say also from the court cases that we've seen against the information regulator, it's not the private sector that's taking the regulator to court. It's the Department of Education that's taking the regulator to court. It's the Department of Justice taking the regulator to court. And that doesn't augur very well in terms of enforcement and also converting the people of South Africa to start respecting data privacy laws and also respecting cybersecurity policies and frameworks that our country has built. So you really need a tough regulator that does its work without fear, prejudice, or any type of influence, be it influence from top, from the executive or political influence. So I think when it comes to enforcement, I think South Africa is really leading when it comes to enforcement, maybe not as successful as we've wanted to, but we've seen there have been decisions against several social media platforms. And as I said, government, which is the worst transgressor when it comes to data privacy laws, has also been affected and has also been fined over the last couple of 12 months. I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Sli. If anyone else want to book his or her reply, please just use the function to raise your hand on Zoom. I see Ahmad. Yes, please go ahead, Ahmad.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think this is a very, very relevant question, and this is one of the questions that is one of the big hurdles for the adequacy recognition, or for the. I'll speak in the context of cross-border data flows. So when we looked at the DCO member states, there was a full spectrum from some member states having very strict legal requirements, very mature data protection laws, and very mature enforcement regimes, to another set of countries where data protection laws were being formulated and the enforcement regimes are coming into action. And then there's a third layer where there is no clarity on data protection at all. By the way, for the third one, we frame them as the easiest ones for cross-border data flows, because there are no rules, so you can the personal data can cross borders in the absence of rules. But this, I think, this diversity in the enforcement approaches is also influenced by the local the intentions to regulate data. So, for example, a particular DCO member state, or in a broader context, may want to localize data, and the enforcement then is focused on the data not being able to leave the countries and cross jurisdiction. On the other hand, with this diversity or global diversity of the trust between the data enforcement regimes, it's really hard. I think this is going to be, going forward in the negotiation process of this interoperability mechanism, is going to be the hardest part, where we can always come up with a checklist of how a country enforces or how a country's regulatory body or a law enforces data protection, versus how one country could trust another with its citizens' data. So again, there's no right or wrong answer to this. I just wanted to bring attention to this being a point, or the main point of contention or argument towards building this trust towards the cross-border data flows.
Excellent. And actually, this leads us to a very interesting consideration, not only on the role of enforcers, but also on the role of the technology that can facilitate the enforcement itself, and how why also we started our debate today stressing the need of not only of privacy by design, but also of the promotion of privacy enhancing technologies, and in also the facilitative regulation that can promote the adoption and the creation of this kind of technologies. Ekaterina, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Luca. As Professor Sli was saying, that there might be a tough regulator. So we do have one. The Russian example, we have Roskomnadzor, which is very weaponized. And so we do not have the problems of enforcement as such, but we have seen the other side of this coin, of course, with very vague, very extended authorities of the regulator, including to block some resources. And this is this signalizes that we always need this balance between protection of public interests, as Roskomnadzor always puts it, as the protection of some public order, public interests on the one hand, and on the other hand, of course, the constitutional rights, the freedom of expression, the human rights, and also the industry development. Because what we see is that some teams, some IT companies prefer to transfer their business to some more liberal, I would say, jurisdictions without such tough supervision from the regulator. And of course, this is the other side of this coin, that enforcement and protection can also give up these negative consequences in terms of both human rights and industry development. So this is always this search for balancing, and which of course a very difficult task for every every government, I think.
Yeah, I think actually this is a very interesting point, especially for the global South leaders that are, or the global South countries that are looking at the BRICS as leaders and examples. Something that we start our upcoming book with is in terms of presenting the complexity of the BRICS groupings in terms of personal data architectures. Is also to take the evolution of the past years with a pinch, with a grain of salt, because again, as we were mentioning now, enforcement is key, but also the independence of the enforcer is a very important element. And most of the BRICS regulators in this moment are not fully independent, even those who are formally independent. So that is a very important point to be considered, because as Sli was mentioning, enforcement is key, but also as Katerina was mentioning, the type of enforcement is probably even more relevant. I see that Wei has a comment on this. Please go ahead.
Yes, I think for in terms of enforcement, the Chinese authorities sometimes, I mean, before the PIPO was introduced, multiple agencies have had that sort of capacity to enforce data protection related regulations, like the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. They regularly invest in mobile apps for data protection violations. They basically every quarter or quarterly they release a report, I mean, saying that which mobile apps violated a certain articles in the data protection law or something. And but then after PIPO was introduced, the CAC coordinated the agencies. It became a 1+N agency enforcement framework, and sometimes it enforced too quickly and too regularly. That's the reason China released a kind of that data cross-border data transfer regulation, particularly losing the registrations in the free trade zones. I think that's basically reflects a kind of dynamic process of enforcement. I mean, loosen it or restricting it, loosen it or restraint in terms of the market, in terms of a market-driven approach. Yeah.
Very good. Do we have any final remarks as we approach the end of our webinar? So I would like to give the possibility to all speakers to provide in a very telegraphic way, maximum 30-40 seconds, their final considerations, so that then we can wrap up this webinar on data governance in the BRICS. If you want to provide any final comment, this is your moment.
Okay, let me start very briefly. I think there is a need of fostering collaboration and cooperation for an inclusive digital economy, and I am very pleased to be a part of this dialogue and a part of the broader dialogues that are facilitated across different regions. And of course, we look for a digital economy where the data flows responsibly, where AI serves the humanity, and the countries cooperate without compromising on their sovereignty and developmental priorities. So these are nice to say words, but really each phrase or each of this goal and ambition can only be fulfilled through a cooperative or collaborative approach. So there's a call out to everybody to join hands and work towards these common objectives. Thank you.
Fantastic. Cesar, please.
Thank you very much. I think with the growth of the BRICS, or should we call it BRICS Plus, as it is growing, one should be concerned about creating a framework for BRICS countries in sharing data, joint cybersecurity efforts, as well as ways of regulating and harnessing and sharing AI capabilities, as well as AI innovations. So I think this is a small step towards the right direction in terms of crystallizing and seeing what the different BRICS countries are doing. I think in the next book, Luca, you will be writing about BRICS Plus and how to create a framework for BRICS Plus.
And actually, to chip on your comment, Sizwe, the conclusion of our current book is precisely to exhort the BRICS to think about a principle base or even a mechanism like model contractor provision that could be for not only for the current BRICS member, but for any other country that could either join them or be part of what they seem to be aiming at in this moment, which is a global framework for data governance, which is, I think, somehow in a very early stage, but it is in the making, as Carolina von der Weid was mentioning this morning in her opening remarks. Do we have any other remarks from our panelists? Well, if not, as we are right on time to finalize, I would like to thank wholeheartedly not only our speakers for today that have really provided excellent presentation and have been great companions in the past years of elaboration of this upcoming volume on personal data architectures in the BRICS countries, whose conclusion is already available on cyberbrics.info. I would like to thank very much our friends from the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs that have partnered with us over the past months for the elaboration of this series of webinars on digital policies in the BRICS. This one of today will be the last one, as now the work is for the Sherpas and BRICS team to finalize the document that will be then launched in July here in Rio de Janeiro on 6 and 7 July for the BRICS summit. Only 10 days after, we will have our annual conference here in Rio, CPDP Latam, the Computers, Privacy and Data Protection Latin America, that this year will be dedicated to data governance for democracy and development in the global majority. So we really aim at expanding our focus beyond Latin America to include global South and global majority leaders such as the BRICS. So this type of discussion we had today will be very relevant for our debate on 16, 17, and 18 July. The 18th of July will be dedicated to AI safety. So this will be also another moment for expand our interactions and build upon the very interesting ideas that were shared today. Thank you very much to everyone for your participation, and have an excellent afternoon or evening, depending where you are watching us today. Bye-bye.